building a better Bay Area, moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC 7 News.
Hi there, thanks for joining us. I'm Kristen Z, and you're watching Getting Answers live on ABC 7, Hulu Live, and wherever you stream. We ask experts your questions every day at 3 to get answers for you in real time. Today, we're marking the one-year anniversary of the deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol. Bay Area Congressman Rokhanna will be joining us a little later in the show to talk about the lessons learned from that day and where the country goes from here. But first, lots of new developments in the Bay Area's battle against the COVID-19 pandemic, including different symptoms for Omicron, the vaccine's impact on Omicron and women's menstrual cycles, and an eye-opening look at why upgrading your mask is so critical right now. Joining us to discuss all this is UCSF infectious disease specialist, Dr. Peter Chin Hong. Dr. Chin Hong, great to see you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me on, Kristen.
I'm so glad we have almost 20 minutes with you because we've got so many questions. And viewers, if you're watching on Facebook Live, feel free to put your questions in there for Dr. Chin Hong. So let's start with the big picture. I saw that California's new cases are slightly lower today. So have we hit the peak of this surge?
Well, I'm crossing my fingers. I've been looking at our UCSF test positivity rate of employees and patients, and it's also plateaued in the last couple of days or so. So I'm holding out hope that we've kind of hit a plateau. Of course, our hospitalizations lag a little bit from cases in the community, but you know, we're kind of rising there. But hopefully, with a plateau in the community, we'll see a plateau in the hospitals eventually.
All right, and I know this is looking into the crystal ball a little bit, and also a lot of factors are still undetermined, including what we do individually and collectively. But once we start to drop, if this is the plateau, how quickly will we drop? I mean, do you think in 2 weeks the surge will be fully over? And by that time, you know, a lot of colleges has postponed the return in person till after MLK Day. Do you think that's going to be fine by then?
I think there'll still be cases, but it won't be quite as hectic as they are now. The prediction is end of January, early February, we'll start to go back to, you know, pre-Omicron.
Okay. I want to ask you, you know, because resources are stretched thin, perhaps less so in San Francisco and the Bay Area, but I'm reading that in some parts of the nation, they're starting to have to ration things like ventilators again and antiviral treatments. So people are asking, when is the right time for me to go to the hospital, right? Like, what symptoms should I really be showing before I go in? Because I don't want to tie up resources unnecessarily.
Yeah, so I'll start with sort of the big two. And the reason why I mentioned the big two is that these are things that you have that early treatment really matters. And of course, heart attacks and strokes. So some of these early signs may be very subtle or symptoms. So they may be slurring of speech. You know, I think, of course, weakness on one side. You don't want to wait on that. I think most people won't. Heart attacks may have very atypical symptoms in women. So it may just start with arm pain, jaw pain, not the clutching of the exact heart, you know, area of the heart, as in many men do. So I think some nausea, just watching for not just the symptoms, but the trajectory of the symptoms. And if you have risk factors for those. And of course, things like eye injuries, things where you might think there's a fracture, because again, early intervention makes a difference. Some of the subtle things as well.
Okay, you're talking about other things that could bring you to the hospital, not that it's triggered by COVID. I just want to be clear.
No. Okay. No, not triggered by COVID. Yeah,
okay.
Sorry. I'm just thinking about things that we might avoid because of all of the infections all around. These are non-COVID infections or conditions. Sorry if I didn't make that clear.
Oh, no, that's okay. I mean, look, there is a lot of confusion right now because with Omicron, I think you've also mentioned that there's some new symptoms that suggest, you know, COVID, whereas it didn't before. So let's talk about some of them. I heard hearing loss is potentially one, right?
Yeah, so basically, I think it's easier to say what we don't see with Omicron that we saw with Delta. So less of loss of smell and taste, less of, you know, shortness of breath, of people being short-winded, a little less fevers. And what's happening is, if you think about biologic, what's happening, tons of virus being produced, 70 times more than Delta, in the big airways, so like close to the throat, and that's causing you to have these cold-like symptoms. So you're focused on the head, you're not, you know, fixated on nose and taste and smell anymore. So you're going to pick up things that like a sinus infection or like blockage of the ears. And I think that's where the ear pain is coming from. Runny nose, all of these things that are upper rather than lower, unless your whole body getting angry.
All right, but because some of those symptoms you mentioned even are similar or indistinguishable even from cold or flu symptoms, how do we know when we suspect we might have COVID and should go in and see a doctor or at least get a test for that?
Yeah, so some of the red flags would be certainly if you're catching your breath when you're walking, and that's definitely a sign to go into the hospital. I think that any uncontrolled diarrhea, sometimes we've been seeing that particularly in kids as a presenting symptom. I mean, and you're worried about dehydration as much. And if you're unvaccinated, I think you're going to be really on high alert for anything that might be COVID, because you may, decompensate a little bit quicker and have more internal illness. And I think if you are immune compromised as well, you'll have a very low threshold.
Okay. Dr. Chin Hong, I want to move on to masking because yesterday California extended the indoor mask mandate through at least February 15th. Do you think that's both wise and necessary?
Yes, it's wise. It's not meaning that the masking by itself is going to be 100% effective. We don't put everything in one basket. So you don't rely only on vaccines, so only on masking or only on testing. It's kind of multimodal approach for Omicron. And what we're doing is we're just trying to hit the pause button to help protect our resources in the hospital, to help protect, services like restaurants and schools and government services. So that's what we're trying to do by all of this. So the masking mandate makes sense to me. We don't know when this is going to end. So I think having that conservative guesstimate is good.
But all masks, as we know, are not created equal. And a Wall Street Journal graphic today, based on a study by the American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists, is pretty telling. So I'm going to put this up. I think it makes a strong case for upgrading our masking, right? Walk us through the dramatic differences here.
So basically, there's a hierarchy of masks, as the chart suggests. And, probably the least effective, of course, not wearing a mask is the least effective thing. But if you wear a cloth mask, that's the first level. The second level, of course, is a surgical mask. And what's not pictured on the graphic is a double mask. So you put the surgical mask on, you might fit it better by tying this loop here. And then you put the cloth mask on top of that. So that's double masking. And then the Tesla of masks is, of course, the N95. But, when I put an N95 mask on, it's very tough to wear for very, very long. But if you're in a high-risk job, like, spending indoors for a long period of time, for example, I took care of several people who worked in utilities, and they were going into people's homes, staying there for a few hours. And that's really when you would need that N95 mask for sure. If you're in a store for a very long time, KN95 or N95. KN95 is a little bit more comfortable to wear than N95 gives similar protection.
All right, I just want to throw that graphic back up one more time because the amount of time difference to transmit an infectious dose of COVID-19 really interested me. So let's say you have a person who's not infected, you're not infected, okay, but you come across someone who is. Am I reading this right, Dr. Chin Hong, where if neither one of you is wearing a mask, then in 15 minutes, you, the previously uninfected person, will get enough to become infected. Is that right? But if you're both wearing N95s, then you have 25 hours of being near each other before you become infected?
Yeah, and if this is non-fitted N95 too, but if you have had it fitted, like if your work allows you to have it fitted, then you can get as much as 2,500 hours of protection. But again, the caveat is this chart looks dramatic. But if you're boosted, it also acts like you're wearing a good mask as well. So think of it that way. And if your immune system is more compromised, it will also put it in the other direction, meaning you may be more susceptible.
Right. Not everyone's going to, have the exact result, but that's still very eye-opening. All right, don't go away because when we come back, we'll talk a lot more with Dr. Peter Chin Hong. In the meantime, he'll answer your questions over on Facebook Live. All right, we'll take a short break here, and here we are with Dr. Peter Chin Hong. Rebecca has a question. She wants to know, do you think that starting in June, if someone is not vaccinated, they need to take the responsibility for any care needed if they catch COVID? I don't know how comfortable you are answering that question, but I know that as doctors, you take this oath, right, to do no harm, you treat everybody, but then there is this question of, look, healthcare is not free and resources are limited. So that is a debate that's being had in your medical community, right?
Yes, I mean, and certainly we've seen it reflected in business already with Delta Airlines, for example, originally adding a surcharge to unvaccinated employees. We've seen in other countries like Singapore, where they're actually charging people if they haven't been vaccinated for healthcare. I don't think we'll come to that in the US. And certainly we're going to take care of anyone coming through the hospital, but you may see insurance premiums go up, possibly just like they do for smoking.
All right, we'll see if it starts to go in that direction. Daniel wants to know, should we be concerned about waning booster immunity? And is the thought that it also wanes after like 6 months, 5 months?
So the big difference is to think about a distinction between infection and serious disease. I think boosting will probably wane and wouldn't give us that first line of defense of infection, but will continue to prevent serious disease and hospitalization and death.
All right. Vicky wants to know, actually her comment is her daughter is vaccinated as recommended by her college, but her husband refuses, and they have a 15-month-old little fella, and I'm worried about the baby. Should she be?
So far, babies may have more trouble if they get it under 5 with the airways are so small that even if they get mucus from like a cold, they may have symptoms. So, but that'll be easy to see. Generally, babies and young kids are not going to the hospital as frequently as adults do. So we're crossing fingers that it'll be okay and mild.
All right, sounds good. Coming back on air. We are back now with Dr. Peter Chin-Hong of UCSF to talk about all the day's COVID news. Look, San Francisco State University today announced, I'm sure you saw, that it's delaying in-person classes until February 14th now. Look, that's 5 weeks from now. Do you think that's necessary?
Well, I think they may be flexible and perhaps they're giving a conservative end, but it may be sooner than that. I think early February will be a good sort of sweet spot to think about, but there are many unknowns in there, and maybe it's easier logistically to restart earlier rather than to extend something later. So, it's half glass full or half glass empty.
All right. San Francisco teachers, this is their second day of a sick out. Not nearly as many participated today, and some Oakland teachers may do the same tomorrow. The teachers say not enough has happened to ensure their safety at school amid this surge. Look, from what you can see, is the school environment somehow less safe than any other environment right now?
I mean, we don't have a ton of data yet with Omicron transmissions in school, but historically in the pandemic, the schools have actually been one of the safest places, even if you just wear a mask and ventilation for transmissions. And when you add vaccines from the kids, we hope that it will be safe. We know that if the teachers are vaccinated and boosted, they're going to be having a very, very low chance of getting ill, going to the ICU, and certainly dying.
Here's a question from Yashmi, who wants to know, is there a need for schools to continue to take temperatures? My kiddo's school does not do that, but I guess maybe some schools do. Is that necessary?
Temperatures are worthless, basically, especially in Omicron. Doesn't really help. It makes us feel good that you're doing something, and maybe it'll pick up a fever if you had something else. But for COVID, not so good.
Okay. What about those antigen tests, the rapid tests, which a lot of schools distributed to their kids before they came back, and many kids did take them? If they get a negative reading on that, does that, I mean, it's never 100%, but does that pretty much assure you that they're not infectious at that point?
Well, we have data from schools showing in 2 big studies that when kids use rapid testing sequentially, even if they were exposed, that there are no transmissions going forward. So we use that in the Test to Stay program in schools. I would say that there's also a recent small study of 30 people showing that initially with Omicron, that rapid test may be negative, PCR may be positive, but at least for transmissibility, it's much lower. We don't rely 100% on testing. So we use it in concert with masking and ventilation, and together everything will make it a safe environment.
All right. Jill has a question. She wants to know, this is going back to masking, is a cloth mask with a pocket adding a filter inside protection enough?
No, I think a cloth mask in the age of Omicron Isn't that great? I'll just tell you a little bit
Even with
more
the filter?
about we know.
Even like a
What
with the
about
filter?
Omicron? Oh, you mean like a? Yeah, I think it's going to be better than a cloth mask for sure.
If
But
you have the
different
filter.
people do. Yes, if you add a filter to it. So it's almost like double masking. But you know, again, it depends on how good you are in putting the filter on.
Okay.
Because again, if you don't fit it well on the sides, you're going to have little airborne particles possibly coming in.
So well-fitting is key for sure. Okay, this one caught my eye today, that the vaccine may have an impact on women's menstrual cycle. First of all, what is that impact? And second of all, is it temporary?
Yeah, so there have been lots of anecdotes throughout the pandemic of women reporting, you know, heavier bleeding, abnormal menstrual cycles. And this study of 4,000 people from the East Coast shows that the duration of the menstrual cycle is higher, but the actual bleeding days are the same. For example, if somebody normally has bleeding for 7 days, it will continue to be 7 days, but it will lag. Like instead of 28 days, total will be 29 days and maybe 30 days. And that will come back to normal in about 2 months.
All right. Look, I know you continue to push the importance of vaccines and protecting people. There seems to be some new info on how they prevent hospitalization with Omicron, but there's a big difference between getting 2 shots versus 3 shots. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we've been seeing more and more data, UK and some from other areas in the US, that when you look at hospitalization as outcome, 2 shots, you know, anywhere from 52 to 65% prevention of hospitalization. When you add that booster, you get up to 90%. But, you know, we don't know the impact on deaths. So maybe deaths will even be prevented more, we think, than the idea of hospitalization. But you're still, you know, using hospital resources by not getting that booster.
Okay. We have about 30 seconds, but I'd like to address Cindy's question here. What about the new variant IHU? That's the one discovered in France. Should we be worried about this more?
No, we shouldn't be worried. Sure, it has a lot of mutations, but it was actually around before Omicron, and we've only had 12 definite cases so far, and they've all been in France.
All right, Dr. Peter Chin-Hong, always great talking with you and learning from you. Thanks so much. We'll see you again next time.
Thanks so much.
Take care. All right, and we'll be right back with Bay Area Congressman Rokhanna to talk about the anniversary of the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. We'll be right back. All right, thanks for joining us today. Here's my chance for a water break. Great questions today. Thank you so much. I always appreciate it when you're fully engaged, and really, you make the show better. Daniel, you're welcome. Dr. Hong is great. Let's see, what else do we have here? How effective are personal air purifiers? Gosh, Darcy, I wish I had a chance to get that question in. I know that, you know, if you have an effective air purifier, that can really do a lot for you. That's part of the reason why transmissions on airplanes have been relatively low, right? Despite being in close quarters with a lot of people, they're cleaning out the air very effectively. So I've got to think that could help. I mean, I don't know about particular brands, but it's a good idea. All right, who else do we have here? What is the best mask for an asthmatic? Oh, Brenda, that's a great question too. Ask again next time when we have a doctor on, okay? Sorry about that, I couldn't get to it today. There's so many great questions. When could I get vaccinated for booster after 2 doses of COVID vaccine? I got Moderna. I think it used to be 6, but now I think they changed it to 5 months. Maybe if my producer, Sherry, can do a quick check on that. I'm pretty sure that the CDC now said if it's been 5 months, you can get the booster. 30. By the way, that's the general guidance. But the fact of the matter is, if you have a particular situation, if you're immunocompromised or if you're if you're more vulnerable, you can talk to your doctor who could, you know, prescribe it and you can get the booster sooner. But yes, my awesome producer who was really quick checked for us. It is indeed 5 months. So after you were done with your original series, 5 months later, you can get the booster.
5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Today, the nation is marking the 1-year anniversary of the deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol as Congress was certifying the presidential election. President Biden spoke about it today, what he calls the web of lies that put a dagger to the throat of America. Now, a year later, is our democracy better safeguarded? Joining us now to discuss that day and where we go from here is South Bay Congressman Rokhanna. Congressman Khanna, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I know that day has left its mark on you. My apologies for asking you to relive it, but describe the moment when you thought you might not make it out of the Capitol.
Well, I was in this office where I'm sitting today, and we first heard that there was a bomb threat, and we all evacuated the Cannon building. I started walking towards the actual Capitol, and then my phone was flooded saying, the Capitol is being invaded, go back to your office. And so I scrambled, we went back to the Cannon building. I went to my office, even though there was still a live bomb threat, closed my doors, locked the doors, and then was here until midnight when the speaker finally called us out and to certify the results. And I just am very grateful to the Capitol Police and everyone who kept us safe.
Looking at these images, still horrifying a year later. But since then, has there been an awakening, you think, that our democracy needs to be protected, or are things worse than ever?
There has been an awakening. I mean, one thing we can take solace from is that our system worked. I mean, ultimately, that very day, we certified the results, President Biden and Kamala Harris as the president and the vice president, that they are now in office, that the Capitol Police has really increased the ability to have security so that something like this never happens again. But I'm disheartened that there are still so many Republicans who are unwilling to condemn what happened. I mean, you can say that some people came there for legitimate protests, fine, and that there were some bystanders who got caught up. But anyone who is watching this should know that there were hundreds, thousands of people who came with the goal of inflicting violence. And I don't understand how every American congressperson and senator doesn't condemn that.
Well, I mean, your GOP colleagues did not, for the most part, attend today's ceremonies, right? The exception being Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who's a Trump critic, who's been ostracized by her own party. Her father, former Vice President Dick Cheney, who served under George W. Bush, was there. Look, today, President Biden laid the blame on the former president. Are there new revelations with regard to Mr. Trump's actions a year ago that you think the public should be aware of?
Just how widespread his effort was to overturn the election. I used to think this was just something in President Trump's mind, but there were PowerPoint presentations shared with 20 to 30 of his senior members where there was a systematic plan to try to get state legislatures and governors to overturn the election results where President Biden had won in Arizona and Georgia, to say that they were fraudulent and send a competing slate of electors. And it's scary how much of that effort there was and how many people in the Trump administration were involved with it.
Many Californians may not be paying close attention because it feels so far away from us. But those who deny the election results, just like the protesters, rioters who were there that day, are now actually running for political offices nationwide, aren't they?
They are. And I think every person who runs for office should be asked a simple question. Do you believe Joe Biden is the legitimately elected president? And do you believe that the insurrectionists were wrong to threaten violence against American democracy? And if they can't answer those two questions satisfactorily, I don't understand how they can represent anyone in the United States Congress or Senate or hold political office by the confidence and trust of their citizens.
Yeah. The other thing that I should mention is that voting rights are being curtailed in many states right now in legislatures. And I wonder if today's events suggest a particular course of action that you think we need to take.
This has to be our highest priority. It's my highest priority. I mean, the year is 2022. We can't have a country where everyone doesn't have an equal right to vote. And in state after state, they're denying people the right to register on the same day, to cast absentee ballots. They know that this is going to impact Black Americans, Latino Americans, young Americans. All we're asking for is that every person have an equal vote. We need to pass the Voting Rights Act. We need to put that on the floor, have the senators vote on it every day if we have to. But let's get actual votes on these bills.
There are some who think that President Biden's comments today may only divide further. I mean, certainly former President Trump is saying that. And there are others who said he needed to say what he wanted to say or had to say today to set up the Voting Rights Act to gain more support for it, including any potential changes to Senate and the filibustering rules. Is that what this is about, you think?
I think President Biden spoke from his heart. I think he came into office wanting to be a unifier, wanting to heal the country, wanting to get past the division. And I remember after January 6th, even Kevin McCarthy was condemning what happened. McConnell was condemning what happened. So many Republicans spoke out against it. But what we've seen over the year, because they fear primary challenges, they don't want Trump to endorse a candidate who's runs against them. I mean, let's just be candid. That's what's going on. They're fearful that they may have a primary challenge or not be in the good graces of Trump. And you know, I was wrong. I thought after January 6th, Trump was done. Trump is stronger today in the Republican Party than he's ever been. So what we see is politics going on. And I think President Biden understands that for us to unify the country, we first have to defeat the forces that aren't willing to condemn violence. I mean, we're not talking about anything that difficult here. We're saying just condemn the people who attacked the Capitol.
A senior law enforcement official tells ABC News that in the 48 hours leading up to today's anniversary, intelligence analysts have been seeing a concerning increase in online chatter urging people to attack members of Congress. Is that true? Have you been warned of that?
We've been warned to be more vigilant, to have greater security. But unfortunately, we live at a time where there are increasing threats against people in public service. And it's sad because our country was founded on the principle that we don't believe in violence to solve political disagreements. And whether you're a Republican watching, a Democrat, an independent, whether you want to vote for me or against me, vote for the president or against the president, I hope we could just all come together around this principle that there is no place for violence in American society and in American politics.
After traumatic events, oftentimes the rallying cry is never again. Do you think what happened a year ago today could never happen again?
I hope so. I think we're better prepared. I think our police officers are doing an extraordinary job. But ultimately, in a democracy, the decision is with the citizenry. And really, what we need is for Americans to figure out how we heal some of the tears in our body politic.
Thank you so much. Don't go away. We'll continue on Facebook Live. Take a short break.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Khanna. If you have a couple more minutes, I'd like to ask you what you thought the most memorable part of President Biden's speech was today. Was there a line that stuck with you?
I think when President Biden said that Trump is a defeated former president, that was a telling statement that democracy triumphed, that the electoral process triumphed. And by the way, democracy triumphed with both Democratic and Republican leaders ensuring a transition to the Biden administration. So I thought that was a moving line.
What about the January 6th Commission's work? Look, and also just what's going on at the Justice Department and in the prosecution. I mean, many of the people who were present that day as rioters have faced charges. But is this getting closer to the top? What is coming down next?
I hope so. Look, there's still work to be done. I mean, one of the things that I can't understand is the people who put the pipe bombs that could have blown up the building I'm sitting in or at least caused significant damage. We still haven't caught them. I mean, how is that possible a year later that people who are responsible for putting bombs in the Capitol complex and our law enforcement hasn't been able to catch them? So we need to put more resources behind that effort. We need to go and prosecute the people at the top that were responsible. I have no problem if there were bystanders, others who were swept up, if they didn't have arms to make sure that, they're not getting the book thrown at them. But the book should be thrown at the people who were at the top of planning this. And so we need to do a lot more.
All right. Congressman Rokhanna, I really appreciate you taking your time on this busy day to share with us your insights on this one-year anniversary of the insurrection at the Capitol. Stay safe, and thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. You too. Stay safe.
All right, everybody. That was really, wow. He was there that day, and
9, 8, 7,
so much to talk about. All right. Wish I had more time. That's how I feel every day.
2, 1.
Thank you so much for joining us on this interactive show, Getting Answers. We'll be here every weekday at 3 on air and on live stream answering your questions. I'll see you back here at 4.